Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. Book review. Actually, I say book review, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the book and the movie as well, just to kind of, give my complete experience with this. So Battle Royale was a book that came out in 1999. For whatever reason, got picked up very quickly by the Japanese movie industry and was made into a movie in 2000. And I don't know if anyone remembers this, but it was news at the time. I don't want to say big news, but it was like, I read about it in Time magazine at the time. It was in the mainstream media a little bit. Because the premise of the movie is it's about a group of high school students who are kind of given guns and weapons and forced to kind of go all kill each other until only one survives. So this premise of high school students gunning down each other was considered very horrific at the time because in America we had just had the Columbine massacre the year before. I hate to say it, but we are rapidly kind of getting to the point where these school massacres are common, where like there's a couple of them every year. I hate to say it, but that's the truth now, isn't it? But back with the Columbine massacre, this was something that was kind of considered new and shocking and horrific, and people were still horrified about what was going on instead of kind of getting to the stage where we are now, which is just kind of accepting it as part of American life. So at that time, the idea of a movie coming from Japan with these high school kids killing each other, gunning each other down, was a very sensitive topic, and the newspapers reported it, but the movie never made it over to the US. Now, I've heard varying reports on this. Initially, I think the first thing I read in the media was that it was banned. But I don't think we don't ban movies in the US. I think what happened is just there was a failure to reach a distribution agreement. The movie had been such a big hit in Japan that they wanted to kind of sell the distribution rights for a big price, but kind of no major US distributor wanted to touch it. So it was unreleasable, even if it wasn't kind of banned. Or, I was just looking this up right now before doing the video review, and was reading that it was a Japanese distributor who had kind of worries about releasing it in the US and the controversy. I don't know. But for whatever reason, it was not releasable in the US for many years. I think it eventually got a video release. But when I was in Japan teaching English in 2001, I saw it in the video stores, and I remembered, this is the movie that was in the news, the big controversy. So I wanted to see what the controversy was, and I rented it. It's, I think the movie is somewhat controversial even in Japan. So some of the school teachers I was working with, kind of older Japanese school teachers, disapproved of the movie or refused to see the movie on principle. But I rented it and watched it, and I did not know what to make of it. I found it fascinating, and I wasn't sure if it was fascinating in a good way or a bad way. I couldn't make up my mind if this movie was just the lowest kind of exploitation, or if there was actually kind of some deeper philosophical points going on here. How to describe it? It's a weird movie. It's almost like a horror movie. Although there's elements of, I don't know. It's almost like a horror movie, maybe would be the best way to describe it. So you have this high school class. They think they're going on a field trip. Then they kind of wake up and they're imprisoned and they're being told they have to go out and kill each other. And they're just horrified. A couple of them die brutally very early on. Then they're kind of sent out there. And immediately, there are these kids that are confused, like, what's going on? Are we really going to do this? And then there are some kids who realize what's going on and start wanting to play the game or trying to kill the other ones. And they're almost as terrified that, the kids that are shooting the other kids are kind of just as terrified, like they're nervous and running and panicking. And you can kind of see that terror kind of in the eyes of kind of all of them. Now, added to this is the fact that they cast very young actors in all these roles. So, if this had been an American movie, they would have cast, 25-year-olds pretending to be 15. Or you know how American movies always cast 20 and 30-year-old people as teenagers. These were, as far as I can tell, actual teenagers playing this role. So kind of comes across more the horror of these kids kind of put into this situation. And it's kind of like what would you do in that situation? Would you be one of these kids who just kind of panics and freezes and then gets killed by the other kids? Or would you be one of these kids who gets into the game, or some of them try and form alliances, but then like they're always, like there's only one winner? It's like the Hunger Games, if I haven't set this up right. Maybe I didn't explain the premise. There's only one winner, so they have to kill each other until there's only one left, and there's only one winner. So they're forming alliances, but they don't fully trust the others sometimes because there can be only one winner. And they think, they're friends with their high school classmates, but yeah, I mean, on one hand, it's kind of like Lord of the Flies. What happens to this innocent group when you put them in this situation? What is human nature really when you get down to it? There are also some interesting subplots going on, which kind of makes the movie more interesting. There's a group of boys who try and hack the system and try and kind of destroy the computers that are keeping them there. There's all these different subplots going on, which makes it interesting. On the other hand, there are just some scenes of kind of brutal violence and gratuitous violence, which makes me think maybe this is just exploitation. I couldn't decide whether this was a deep philosophical movie or if this was just a low form of exploitation. But whatever, it fascinated me. It stuck in my brain. It's one of those movies you see it and then you're just thinking about it nonstop for like the next week. And I was writing emails home to my friends, kind of describing the movie in detail, and I was just really fascinated by it. It's one of those movies. There are some movies you can really only watch once, because like the whole experience is just like the shock, the initial shock of just kind of seeing it for the first time. When you rewatch it, the shock value is lessened. So I found that I have a difficult time rewatching Battle Royale, and partly for those reasons. I haven't seen it in years. I think I've rewatched it maybe once or twice since I initially saw it in 2001. There was also a couple things about this movie. On the one hand, it did seem like a character study, like what is human nature really, what would happen to real people put in this situation. But on the other hand, you've got this high school class who's sent to this island to kill each other. But then there are these two older students who kind of come in out of nowhere. There's one guy who just really enjoys killing. So he's kind of requested to join the game. And there's another guy who, an older student who wants to rejoin the game because he has unresolved issues from the first time he plays it, and he kind of wants to, save people, or I forget what his motivation is. But I thought that kind of spoiled it a little bit, because now it's not so much just like, what would this class of high school kids do? Now we have kind of external pressures, where one kid is just kind of like evil incarnate, and then one kid is kind of helping them to kind of find their way out of it. So that seemed to kind of take away from the philosophical side of it, or the the idea that this was a serious study of human nature when you have this kind of kid who joins the game who's just kind of, and he's like kind of the Terminator, like nobody can kill him. He kind of pops up and he kind of shoots everyone else, and at one point some of the boys try and gang up on him, but he's just kind of like this unstoppable machine. And that kind of seemed a little bit more Hollywood, or a little bit more kind of, like an action movie thing and not like a serious movie. So that bugged me a little bit. There are some other elements of the movie that bugged me. Eventually, I ended up just reading the book. Curiosity got the better of me. So again, the whole thing was based on a book by a guy named Koushun Takami. It's been made into a manga since then, but I think the book was first. So it was the book first, then the movie, then the manga. Now the book's been translated into English, so I found an English copy of the paperback book in a bookstore. I read it, and then this is my review. Battle Royale is the book that the controversial Japanese movie was based on. In the book and the movie, a class of 9th grade students is taken to a deserted island, given weapons, and forced to kill each other until there is only one winner left. The movie was a huge hit in Japan, but no US distributor would touch it, especially in the post-Columbine era. So I believe to this day, it is hard to get a hold of a copy of the movie in America. I wanted to check out the book because I was kind of curious about the themes in the movies. But after having read the book, I can report that the book has no social redeeming value whatsoever. And I don't particularly recommend it. Although I do have to admit, it did hold my interest while I was reading it. So I guess maybe classify it as a guilty pleasure. I don't know. The movie had made quite an impression on me. It was horrific, but it also seemed to touch on a lot of philosophical issues. There was generational conflict in the movie. The older generation that was forcing the kids to do this, and the kind of kids resenting the older generation. There was an issue with fascist governments. There was some allusions to the competitive nature of Japan's educational system, which this movie was supposedly a metaphor for. There was a Lord of the Flies Redux type themes about human nature. I could go on and expand on each of these. I could go on and talk about each of these themes more, but there's already been so much geek ink spilled on this movie already. Just search the internet. There are tons of think pieces on Battle Royale. So I was interested to see if the book would help me to further understand the movie. But after reading the book, I've become disillusioned with it. And my disillusionment with the book has maybe, in retrospect, kind of caused me to think maybe the movie wasn't all that great either. I don't know. To my mind, scenes of 9th grade students gunning each other down are only acceptable if it's being done for a purpose. I mean, Lord of the Flies also contained many horrific scenes of child violence. But the author was doing it for a reason. If, on the other hand, we are watching students blow each other up purely for cheap excitement, then this is the lowest form of bad taste. The movie left that question hanging. I wasn't sure if it was exploitative or bad taste. But in the book, it's pretty clear. It's just obviously exploitation. The book is a novel. I mean, it's a paperback. But just kind of reading through it, it reads like the kind of thing you'd see in a comic book. Many of the characters are comic book type stereotypes. There's the femme fatale, the evil genius, the young hero, his love interests, among others. There are clear evil characters and there are clear good characters. So it's clearly not a deep treatise on the complexity of human nature. The violence in the book is described vicariously, seemingly with a purpose to excite the audience. And the book has a lot of disturbingly sexual parts about 14 and 15-year-old girls. They're described in disturbingly sexual terms. It makes me think of what's known in Japan as the Lolita complex, this sexualization of young girls. So, after reading the book, I'm kind of leaning more towards the side of saying it's all trash. There's nothing deep about it. Except, I guess this raises the question, can a book transcend a movie? No. Can the movie transcend the book? I've not read the book, but I'm told that the original Godfather was just kind of a trashy novel. But then the movie, of course, is a work of art. I'm given to understand that Gone with the Wind was the same way. It was just kind of a cheesy romance, but they made a really great movie out of it. I've not seen either, the book or the movie with Gone with the Wind. Anyways, you could make the argument that the movie has to be judged on its own terms. Just because the book is trashy doesn't mean the movie is going to be trashy. I hate to say this, but I do kind of give the book, I don't want to say I give it a recommendation, but it did hold my interest while I was reading it. I mean, I was just, I had no problems getting through it. It's a book that's very easy to kind of keep flipping the pages and keep reading, even though the whole thing is really trashy and has no social redeeming value. So, a cautious recommendation? I don't know. I guess it depends. If you see it in bookstores, it does kind of hold your interest while you're reading it. Yeah, but I don't really recommend it.